Insights to this that maybe you haven't thought of before. That's the goal. We're going to be talking about the woman and the stones, the woman caught in the act of adultery. I want to look at the backstory of this a little bit and just see what God says about this. So in John chapter 8, we finished up last week in John chapter 7, and we're moving into John chapter 8 now. Verse number 1 says, "And Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives." It's a familiar place where Jesus went several times in his ministry here on the earth. Verse number 2, "And early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them." So Jesus went into the temple early in the morning, and the crowds followed him in there, wanted to hear what he had to say, and he began teaching them. And then this event gets interrupted by a group of Pharisees, religious leaders. You know, it was always the religious leaders that were the problem. And that's true today even. We've got some wicked religious leaders. I'm not referring to anyone here, but in general we have, Jesus says, beware of Antichrist, beware of wolves in sheep's clothing, and inwardly they're ravenous wolves. Their father's the devil. And there's always that segment. You need to judge. We talked about that previous week. So, we're not supposed to judge. Jesus says judge spiritually, not physically. What spiritually is happening? And how do we judge them? By their works. Are they doing things that are godly, or are they doing things that are ungodly? Some of these TV preachers that are preaching, if you trust God, you're going to be a multi-millionaire. While they live in $400 million mansions, and they've been married and divorced 3 times, and they've got a girlfriend on the side, and we can look at that spiritually and say, no, that is not what the Lord would have them be doing. So we can judge that. So verse number 3 here, we see the Bible says, "And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him," Jesus, "a woman taken in adultery." Caught her in the act. She's in adultery right now. They walked in, and what an awkward situation that was. They grabbed her, caught her in the act of adultery, and when they had set her in the midst, imagine that. How humiliating for this woman. She gets caught in an act of adultery. That's humiliating enough. But this group of religious leaders grabbed her, drug her to Jesus in the temple, and flopped her right down, if here in our little Sunday school class I'm teaching, and here you guys are all listening, we flop her right down in the center, and everybody's looking at her. How humiliating that must have been for her. Now, obviously, she shouldn't have been in adultery, okay, but insult to injury over and over and over here. She's caught, she's embarrassed, she's drugged in here, she's flopped down in the middle of the temple. When you're in the middle of adultery, that's probably the last place you want to be drugged into. And they flop her down into the mist. And then in verse number 4, they say unto him, "Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act." So it wasn't like they heard a rumor that this lady did this. She was caught red-handed. Okay, she was caught. Verse number 5, "Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou?" Verse number 6, "This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him." So once again, the Pharisees and Sadducees thought they had developed the perfect diabolical plan to trap Jesus, to make him less popular with the people. Now, to a much lesser extent, we kind of see this playing out today with Trump. They have tried every single angle to trip him up, stop him, all these lawfare shenanigans. And he's guilty of a lot of things. I'm not saying that he's not. But we see this concerted effort to try to nail him at every cost. So this is kind of relatable to what the Pharisees and the religious leaders were trying to do for Jesus. They were willing to do anything to try to get the people to turn on him and themselves to receive the power back. What did they want in that day? They wanted the power. What do our politicians want today? They want the power. Because power comes corruption, comes greed. The love of money is the root of all evil, not money. Hopefully everyone in this room is going to give something today as a tithe or offering or for missions or whatever. that is good. That same dollar can be done with good. You can, Sandy can take her grandson out for ice cream, that's good. She can pay her electric bill, that's good. But money can also be used for evil, and the loving of it is where the evil is, not the money itself. But we see here they were trying to lay a trap for Jesus. So, what is this trap? And what is this law of Moses? I want to cover this. What were they referring to that's saying she was caught in the very act of adultery? That they said in verse number 5, now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what say you? There's the trap. So if Jesus said, let's stone her to death, part of the followers were not going to like that answer. And if Jesus said, no, let's let her off, part of the followers are going to be like, oh, wait a minute, you're breaking the law here because Moses told us this. But the problem was these Pharisees and Sadducees were being massive hypocrites because they were not accurately following the law. And they had an agenda. What was the agenda? Did they care about this woman? They really didn't. What did they care about? Tripping up Jesus if they could. And I love how Jesus every single time was so masterful at avoiding these traps. Remember they said, "Oh Lord, here's a coin. What should we do? Should we pay Caesar?" Which the crowd would have been, they hated the Romans and Caesar. Don't do that. Or should we give it to God? What should we do? Trying to trap him. Knew no matter how he would answer it, there would be dissent. We answered it wonderfully. Give to Caesar what's Caesar. He said, whose picture's on there? Well, Caesar's. Give it to him. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's. Give to God what's God's. And, wonderful, wonderful answers. So let's turn back to Leviticus chapter 20, and let's look at this law of Moses and see how hypocritical they were being. They were not concerned about following the law. They were concerned about tripping up Jesus. So Leviticus chapter 20, let's see the first fallacy of what they were saying. A half-truth is actually a lie because you didn't tell the full truth. You're trying to deceive. They were telling a half-truth here. We're going to look at this in Leviticus and also in Deuteronomy, and I want to show you some more things in Deuteronomy. But here in Leviticus chapter 20, they're referring to verse number 10. And the man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, so they're married, and he's having sex with her outside of them being married together, that would be adultery. Even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. That was the law of Moses that God gave the children of Israel early on when they became a nation. He said, if a man is sleeping with another man's wife and they're caught, the man and the woman shall be taken and they shall be stoned to death. Now, let's look at this situation here. Did these Pharisees and scribes say this woman was caught in the very act? Mm-hmm. What did the law say? They both get it. Where's the man? Where's the man? Maybe the man was one of their buddies. Maybe the man was one of them. They weren't considering following the law. If they were really wanting to follow the law, he should have been right there too. But they let him go, for whatever reason. Maybe they'd been guilty too.
Or maybe he wasn't a married man.
Yeah. But still, outside of marriage, and we're going to look at that, they weren't married, so he shouldn't have been doing that. And they didn't bring him along. They weren't concerned about that. They weren't really following the law. They were not married. They were having adultery. Sex outside of marriage is adultery. And they didn't bring him along. So they weren't really interested in following the law. Maybe he was tough to wrangle. Maybe they couldn't wrestle him like they could wrestle this woman and drag her. Who knows? Who knows what the reason was? The Bible doesn't say. But both of them should have came forward if they really were interested in the law. But that wasn't their motivation. Their motivation was trying to find a stumbling block for Jesus. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 22, and we're going to get into some other stuff here. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And I'm going to look at this whole chapter because I want you to see how strict this law was. And I want you to, as we're reading through these, think about, some of these seem very, very harsh. But let me ask you, is God concerned about the family? He is. Did God institute marriage and the family? He did. Does everybody running around sleeping with everybody, does that hurt the family and the marriage? It absolutely does. So if the penalty is I'm a married man and I go sleep with some other man's wife, or I'm having sex with somebody else other than my wife, does that tear up and hurt the family? It sure does. But if all of the citizens see me get rocks hit in my head till I'm dead and her get rocks hit in her head, that's harsh. But if one couple gets hit in the head with the rocks, and you watching that, Sandy, you interested in cheating on your husband? Zach, you interested in cheating on your wife? If you see rocks hit me in the head till I'm dead? A small sacrifice saves multitudes of families and marriage. Same as in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, when you had a rebellious child, there was a strict procedure on a rebellious child. Let's say Sandy and Dave had a kid they couldn't control. They were to do their best to try to get this kid under control. They couldn't. What would they do? Bring him to a group of the elders of the men. Say it was a young teenage boy. And this boy was just rambunctious. Sandy and Dave are just heartbroken that this kid just will not listen to nothing. It brings him to the council of men of the church. And this council of men work on him for a while. And we love on him. Maybe we rough him up a little bit, whatever. He still doesn't do it. Then he bring him to the priest. And the priest says, boy, knock it off or else. And the boy still doesn't behave. The Bible then commanded the entire congregation, everyone, take this boy who first didn't listen to mom and dad, didn't listen to any of the council of the men, didn't listen to the high priest. So he's went through step 1, step 2, step 3, 3 strikes. 4 strikes, the entire community would take that boy to the edge of the city with every person watching. The moms, the dads, grandmas, grandpas, the kids, everybody. And they would throw rocks at him until he was dead. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. 250,000 people there watched one rebellious kid that wouldn't ever get under control get hit in the head with rocks till he was dead. That's horrible. What do you suppose all the rest of the kids did for about the next 20 or 30 years? Listened. So when we see some of these things, you have to look at what's the big picture. God wants to preserve the family. He wants the children to be obedient to your parents. That's a commandment. Wants wives and husbands to stay together. Wants the family unit to be strong. What do we have in society today? Everybody's sleeping with everybody. Everybody's trading partners. The kids are all rebellious to their parents. The kids are punching the moms in the faces, and they're stabbing their dads to death. And it's like a zoo because the family unit is broken up. If the devil can break the family up, he can get the members. When the family's strong, the devil can't get in. So the devil always attacks the family. Look at it in society. What's a family unit now? It's a mom and a dad. It's 2 moms. It's 3 dads. It's a dad and a goat. It's a mom and a chimpanzee. That's coming. The next thing is what do they call this? Pedophilia will be the next thing that's accepted in society. It's young love. I'm 58. It's not my fault that I'm in love with a 10-month-old baby. Don't you judge me. I can't help it. That'll be the next thing that we're going to be told to swallow and accept. Okay? But God's standards are different than that. God is trying. So when we look at Deuteronomy 22, what's the thing here? God is trying to preserve. If 1 or 2 has to pay the price for the salvation of everyone else, didn't Jesus have to die to save everybody else? So that's the thing here. I'll guarantee you, when I was a teenage boy, I was kind of rambunctious and rebellious. But if I seen a kid I know get rocks hit in his head until he was dead, when mom or dad says something, yes sir, yes ma'am, for a long time. I bet for a long time, if that kid's name was Wilbur, I'll bet for generations, remember what happened to Wilbur? Dad says, take out the trash. All Dad has to say is, Wilbur? Yes sir, I'm taking it out. I'll scrub the trash can when I get it back. For the good of the family. So let's look at Deuteronomy 22. Look at God's principles here. Now, we're not living under the law anymore, but his principles, the law itself is good. What does it do? Shows us that we're bad. Exodus 22. We're going to read the whole chapter here because it's really good. Thou shalt not see thy brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt in any case bring them again unto their brother. So back in that day, your livestock was huge. That was your net worth, your survival, your money, your everything. So if I seen my neighbor's, one of his livestock get out, I can't just didn't see it. I'm just going to grab it and put it in with my herd. God said, no, you're not going to do that. Because if maybe Zach only had 2 oxen, that was his entire net worth for his survival's family. If they get out, and I knew it, I need to bring it back to him. That's important. Because what if later on, how does that make me as a neighbor to Zach? Zach says, hey, my stuff got out, Mark brought it back to me. Our relationship is good. We're good neighbors. But what happens later on? Zach says, you dirty stinker, you stole my ox. It's bad for the society and the community. God's principles are always good. Verse number 2, and if thy brother be not nigh unto thee, or if thou know him not, then thou shalt bring it unto thine own house, and it shall be with thee until thy brother seeketh after it, and thou shalt restore it to him again. No stealing. Return it to its rightful owner. Verse number 3, in like manner shalt thou do with his ass, and shalt thou do with his raiment, and with all lost things of thy brother, which he hath lost, and thou hast found, shalt thou do likewise. Thou may nottest hide thyself. So not the old finders, keepers, losers, weepers. God says, if it ain't yours, get it to its rightful owner. Otherwise, it's stealing. Verse 4, thou shalt not see thy brother's ass or his ox fall down by the way, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt surely help him to lift them up again. So if his ox falls in a ditch and Zach's trying his hardest to get that thing out, and I walk by like, no, I didn't see that. God said, no, you get involved and you help him get that ox. Help your neighbor. Help your neighbor. That is good for a community and good for relationships and good for families. Verse number 5, the woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. Verse number 6, if a bird's nest chance to be before thee in the way, in any tree or on the ground, whether they be young ones or eggs, and the dam, which is the female bird, setting on the eggs, sitting upon the young or upon the eggs, thou shalt not take the dam with the young. So God says, leave them alone. Don't be going, ooh, I think I'm going to eat that bird in the tree and let her eggs die or the young die. No, you leave her alone. She's a young mama with babies. You leave her alone. Verse number 7, but thou shalt in any wise let the dam go, and take the young to thee, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest prolong thy days. So don't take the mom away and let the babies die. You don't do that. If you have to eat, you can take the babies, leave the mom alone. You don't cause unnecessary death that way. Verse number 8, when thou buildest a new house, thou shalt make a battlement for thy roof, that thou bring not blood upon thine house, if any man fall from thence. So make a battlement. What is that? You had to put a thing up on your roof, so if you got people helping you on the roof, they can't fall off. So you don't because somebody's trying to help you, you don't cause their death by negligence and bring their blood upon your house. Verse 9, thou shalt not sow thy vineyard with divers or many different kinds of seed. If you're going to plant a vineyard for grapes, don't throw some pumpkin seeds in there and some sweet corn and cucumbers. You don't pollute it. Lest thy fruit of thy seed which thou hast sown and the fruit of thy vineyard be defiled. Probably a farming practice. Maybe you bring different kinds of weeds, different kinds of problems, cross-pollination where things don't grow well. God is trying to keep everything pure. He wants to keep the family pure, wants to keep the crops pure. Verse number 10, thou shalt not plow with an ox and an ass together. I think that would I would think an ox would be a lot stronger. I mean, the donkey would be much weaker. You'd be plowing crooked and not pulling the same strength. Verse number 11, thou shalt not wear a garment of divers sorts, as of woolen and linen together. Don't wear a bunch of mixed different kind of fabrics. Thou shalt make the fringe upon the four corners of thy vesture, wherewith thou coverest thyself. If any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, so a guy gets married, they're both virgins, he goes in unto her, and suddenly realizes, I don't like her, I hate her. But is she a virgin anymore? No, you've taken that from her. Verse number 14, and give occasion of speech against her, He goes out there and says, you know what, I hate this woman. She's terrible. I don't like her. He's running her down, bad-mouthing her. God's not going to look favorable upon that. And give occasion of speech against her and bring up an evil name upon her and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid, meaning saying, hey, I married her in good faith. She's supposed to be a virgin. She's not a virgin. I don't like this woman anymore. She's supposed to be a virgin. She's not a virgin. He's running her down. God's not going to let that slide. You're going to have to prove that accusation. So in verse 15, then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. And the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man to wife, and he hateth her. And lo, he hath given occasion of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. So it was pretty intense in those days. When you got married, you needed to be a virgin, okay? And if they brought the cloth that proved that she was a virgin, you know, obviously the first time you have sex, there's blood. If they said, hey, here's the garment that proved her virginity. I mean, that was a father's bond that I'm giving my daughter to you. She's a virgin. And if he could produce that, that husband was in big trouble. Verse number 18, and the elders of the city shall take that man and chastise him, and they shall amends him, which means they will fine him, and 100 shekels of silver, which was a couple of years' wages. He's going to be chastised, looked down on in the community, and pay a hefty fine because of that, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he's tried to ruin the father's good name and the daughter's good name. Because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife, he may not put her away all his days. So how important is marriage to God? It's important. Okay? This foolish man trying to get out of it. Maybe he's seen a girl a few weeks later was prettier, and he thought, I'm going to get rid of this one and go get her. God says, not so fast. You're not going to ruin her good name or her father's good name. But if this thing be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die. Why? Why didn't they do the boy? They didn't catch her in the act. They don't know who the boy is. They don't know who the boy is. Can't prove who the boy is, but they can prove she wasn't a virgin. So she lied. And she'll be stones. Because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house, so shalt they put evil away from among you. Okay, let's go on. If a man be found lying with a woman married to an husband, then they shall both of them die. So the Pharisees and Sadducees should have brought the man and the woman both to Jesus, but they did not. They weren't really concerned about the law. They were concerned about a trap. And the woman, so shalt they put away evil from Israel. Okay, let's go on. Let's look at another scenario. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto an husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out into the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, meaning she was a willing partner, okay, being in the city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. They weren't married yet, but they were betrothed. Remember, Joseph and Mary were betrothed. They were promised. It was an engagement. There was a ceremony that we talked about that in other times. I'm going to marry your daughter, and I'm going to go back to my father's house, and I'm going to build a room and get my finances together. It was a done deal. The engagements didn't get broken back in those days. It was serious stuff. So she's engaged to another man. She says, well, you're kind of cute. Let's go back here behind the barn. And they get caught. They're both going to be dead. Now let's go on. Well, there's a lot of young virgins roaming around that maybe aren't engaged or they're not married yet. What about them? Verse number 25. But if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, she's out working for her father in the field, and this man comes along and forces her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. She was not a willing participant. He raped her. He's dead. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death, for when a man riseth against his neighbor and slayeth him, even so in this manner. For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her, to help her. If a man find a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give into the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her. He may not put her away all the days of his life. A man shall not take his father's wife, nor discover his father's skirt. So what was another thing? You couldn't marry your father's wife. Why? That just pollutes the family, and that causes problems. Either your dad died, so you took your mom, or maybe your first mom died. More likely, your first mom died, your father, her being dead. He could remarry, and maybe your father died, and then you married her. Or maybe your father had a reason for a real reason for a bill of divorcement against her, and then the son married. Why? That hurts the family. Does that weird it out? You know, the dad, now the son marries the dad's wife? That puts a wedge in the family and causes problem. Everything God's doing is to preserve that family. Some of these things seem harsh, but men, if you know that's the penalty, any interest in raping some young girl in a field? No. Sleeping with your neighbor's wife? No. What's it going to do? Preserve families. Protect women. Protect families. Protect the children. God didn't want broken homes and orphan children and all that stuff. All these things protect them. So that is the law that they were referring to. But they were not interested in any of that. So interesting here, we'll finish here in a few minutes. Verse number 6. This they said, tempting him, as they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. Jesus pretended that he didn't hear him, although we know he did. He started writing something in the dirt. Verse number 7. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. Notice he didn't say, she's not guilty. He didn't excuse her of her sin. So I've heard some people say, oh, well, Jesus broke the law because he didn't have her put to death. He didn't say that. He just said, all right, if you're going to stone her, whoever is without sin, you do it. What happened? And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own consciences, went out one by one, beginning at the oldest, even unto the last, and Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Now, the crowd of people that came to hear Jesus speak are still there. But this mob, one by one, dropped their stones and walked away. Now, much speculation has been, what did he write in the sand? No idea. No idea. Many have speculated, if Zach's one of these people ready to throw the stone there, maybe Zach wrote Sally's name on the ground, and Sally's the one that Zach secretly did this with 5 years ago. And Zach went, who knows? Who knows? We know whatever he wrote was impactful because they all dropped their stones and walked away. So Jesus was not excusing her sin in any way, shape, or form. He was just saying, okay, if we are going to play this game, you throw the stone. Who was her rightful judge? Them? Or was she face to face with her rightful judge? In Revelation, who will judge the sins of the people, of the sinners in the last day? It's him. It's him. Verse number 10. When Jesus had lifted up himself, so he stands up, and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, who are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? He said, where did all your accusers go? And she said to him, this is so beautiful. She said, no man, Lord. She called him Lord. She realized who he was. She said, no man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. I want you to understand, was this woman's life in a good spot when she met Jesus? No. She was caught in the act of adultery, obviously a sinner, probably had a whole other, if she knowing the law was willing to put herself in that situation, she probably had a multitude of other problems and sins as well. I think it's fair to speculate that. Understand that she was more important and more precious to Jesus than the sum of all of her mistakes. That's what we need to remember by this. we're full of mistakes. We're full of sins. But to Jesus, we are more precious than all of our mistakes. John, for time's sake, I'll finish up real quick. John chapter 3, verse 17 says, God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but through him the world might be saved. So when Jesus came back this first time, with his job, you're going to hell, I'm judging you. No, what was his mission? Rescue and save, share the gospel, tell people how to be saved. So he was coming. Now, what did he tell her? Go and sin no more. Turn from your wicked way and live is what he was telling her. Now, if she doesn't do that, at a later day in Revelation, he will judge her and send her to hell. But he didn't come the first time to condemn. He came the first time to rescue. And that was consistent with what the Father sent him to do. What did the Apostle Paul said? Jesus came into the world to save sinners, whom I am the chief. What was Jesus' mission? To save people. He was more interested in rescuing her than condemning her. He was the only one that could condemn her by rights. They couldn't. He could. He chose to try to rescue her. That was what his mission was. 1 Peter says that he bore our sins that we might be saved. Who was going to pay for this woman's sins? Her right then and there? Or Jesus in a short period of time up on that cross? He knew her sins were going to be covered up on that cross. He had the ability to tell her to go and sin no more. In James chapter 2, it talks about mercy triumphs over judgment. Zach says every Sunday, I want to thank God for his goodness, his grace, his mercy. What was he showing this woman? Mercy. Goodness, grace, mercy, all those things. He saw how valuable she was, not her sins and her circumstances. He saw past that and saw how precious she was. And the Bible says in Romans that when sin abounds, grace abounds the much more. Her sin was vile and wicked, no doubt about it. But God's grace was much greater than that. He knew he was going to go on that cross and her sins were going to be covered. So he said, my daughter, go. Now he didn't excuse it. What did he tell her to do? Don't do it anymore. I forgive you. Don't do it anymore. The Bible says, turn from your wicked way. Her way was wicked, okay? Like our ways are wicked. Turn from them and live. So a beautiful story here of Jesus could have condemned this woman and followed the law, although the whole thing she was definitely guilty. The whole thing was a charade. They weren't interested in the law. They were interested in trapping him. But we see where Jesus and God's goal is grace and mercy. When sin abounds, grace abounds the much more. So a beautiful story here of Jesus looking at the person, not trying to be the judge and condemn them for sin, but forgiveness and grace and mercy and love. Did he love this woman? He sure did. I don't know, but I bet this lady became a believer. She said, what did she say? She said, no man, Lord. Who do you call Lord? A Lord, somebody that you have submitted to. So I believe she turned her life around and got saved. The Bible doesn't later say that she got caught again. I bet she became a follower. If she was facing rocks in her head till she was dead, did you think she knew as they were dragging her to this spot what her fate was? And here's a man that said, no, I forgive you. That would be hard to just brush off and tomorrow be like, well, I don't remember that guy. When you're on your way to death and the Lord rescues you, you should not forget that. She said, no man, Lord. I think she got saved. Zach, dismiss us in prayer, please.